and welcome to the 16th Annual Savannah Book Festival. This year's festival is being presented by the Philip E. and Nancy B. Beekman Foundation, Nancy and David Citron, Robert Faircloth, the Courtney Knight Gaines Foundation, and the Gerald D. and Helen M. Stevens Foundation, with a special thanks for a grant from Georgia Humanities. We are especially grateful to an anonymous donor for sponsoring the Lutheran Church of the Ascension Fellowship Hall today. We'd also like to welcome all our generous sponsors and literati members. It is through your support that we are able to make festival events this Saturday free to the public. 90% of the revenues come from our donors and literati members, and we thank you. This year's festival is full of great events and authors. We don't want you to miss any of the fun, so download the Savannah Book Festival app on your phone and you can be in the know. If you need more information about downloading the app, you can find it on the back of your program. Jack Du Brul will be signing festival-purchased copies of his book in the Telfair Square immediately following this presentation. If you are planning to stay for the next author, James Rollins, please move forward to fill the seat as the venue empties. This assists the ushers in determining availability for this session. I'm sure by now you've turned your cell phone off and you understand that we ask that you do not use flash photography. On the back of your program, you'll find a QR code for a survey. Please take a moment to share your opinion. And now I just have to pause. Who's from out of town? All right, so we got a good crowd from out of town. So we definitely want to get your survey and your feedback in terms of how you've enjoyed Savannah. So thank you all very much. Later, as you exit the venue, you will see our wonderful volunteers holding yellow buckets. We hope you will consider making a donation to the Savannah Book Festival. It is only through your generosity that we are able to keep Festival Saturday free. If cash is a thing of the past for you, you can donate via Venmo with the QR code on the back of your program or through our website. Please help us to continue sharing the love of books and free Festival Saturday. We will have the opportunity for questions and answers at the end of the talk. Please raise your hand and an usher will be glad to bring you a microphone. We want everyone to be able to hear your question. Jack Du Brul is with us today courtesy of Liz and Kent Uranus. Jack Du Brul is the author of the Philip Mercer series, most recently The Lightning Stones, and is the co-author with Cussler of the Oregon Files novels Dark Watch, Skeleton Coast, Plague Ship, Corsair, The Silent Sea, and The Jungle, as well as the Isaac Bell novels The Saboteurs and The Titanic Secret. He lives in Virginia. Please give a warm Savannah welcome to Jack.
A bunch of years ago, I was a overeducated bartender in Florida, and one night we had a Elvis impersonator that came in, and the show was supposed to start around 8 o'clock. Well, the first woman showed up at 4 to sit right in front, had drank water for a couple hours, wanted the right front row seat. So with that in mind, I don't mind you're all here early for Jim Rollins' talk. I understand it, so that out of the way. Thank you so much for having me here. I am delighted. It's my first book festival. Certainly won't be my last. I've had a great time. Like all of you, I love books. I love reading. That's why I did do what I do. So one other thing to think about before we get to the Q&A, I want to do that. But this is a limited edition Titanic Secret. The last book I know of that both Clive and I signed. So whoever has the best question gets the book. So there. At the turn of the 20th century, one branch of my family was extremely wealthy. He was an inventor and kind of an industrialist out of Cincinnati, Ohio. Had a spectacular mansion, had all kinds of inventions in there for it. One of the first homes in America with central heating, and self-made man. And at the time, the age, self-made men took their families to Europe for a trip to kind of show them the old world. He was originally from Canada, but the family had come from France. So he takes the family over to Europe in 1911, spent a few months there touring around, doing all the things, meeting people, doing stuff for his business as well. In the spring, he decides it's time to come back home, and so they book passage, and at the last minute, they get a call, or telegram actually, some famous bullfighter in Spain is retiring, and all the literati and glitterati of Europe are going down to see this one swan song of the bullfight. So that he says, yeah, fine, we'll do it. So they go down to Spain rather than go on board the ship to come to the United States, but they did pack up most of their belongings. So the ship left Southampton, and on April 14th, 1912, it sank. It was, of course, the Titanic. So the Titanic lore has always been part of our family history. You know, it's always fascinated me as a little kid. It's just you know, amazing. My family could have been on that. You know, I wouldn't exist, possibly, because of the Spanish bullfighter, thank God. So, so mid-70s, God bless my poor father. He's definitely in hell because he had good intentions on everything, and the road that paved, but still. He bought a book called Raise the Titanic with the intention of reading it because he thought, oh, wow, you know, something to Titanic. Where he never read it, and it sat around our house for a long time, and I really paid much attention to it. And then one day I was like, oh, you know, I was bored, picked it up, and started reading it. And it absolutely, literally changed my life. Of course, it's Clive Cussler's, it was his third novel, but it was the one that really launched his career. And it blew my mind. I didn't know a world like that existed. And so from that moment forward, I became a voracious reader. I, of course, read whatever Clive had, you know, started finding other authors that I enjoyed, and just became, you know, my hobby. I just love to read, like most of you. You know, just enjoy. You know, someone said it. You know, you build you shoot the film in your head. You know, as you read the words, you're creating those pictures. You know, the author's kind of guiding you, but for each individual, the book is yours. And I just thought that was fascinating. So years go by, and you know, I go through high school, and I'm still reading quite a bit, and starting to college. And you know what? I can't afford to buy books anymore, and the library near me was just for, you know, school books. So like, well, you know, I'm a poor college student. I have no money. I can write a book. Why not? I give this a shot. So I started writing a book, and you know, my friends thought I was crazy, but you know, hey, I was enjoying myself, and I got probably about halfway through it by my senior year in college, and I said, you know, I think it may be kind of good. And I read about a literary agency that was actually, come to find out, it's kind of a scam. You pay them like $300, and they'll look at like the first chapters of your book, and if they're good, they might be able to represent you. So I scraped together the money, the little money I had, sent it off, and got a letter a few weeks later that said, your book is terrible. It's never going to be published. It's just you're deluding yourself with this novel. That being said, you do turn a pretty good phrase. I'm like, oh, okay. You know, so it was disappointing, but also encouraging. And that, you know, I was like, maybe I'll try again someday. And so I finished college, again, overeducated bartender in Florida. And if you've ever worked a hotel or a restaurant shift, you know, afterward you're kind of amped up a little bit. You got something, you know, just a little more energy. And rather than go out drinking with my friends, I go back to my apartment, and I started the second book. And okay, something to do, cheap hobby. I enjoyed it, had a lot of fun with it. So this one I get halfway through, 3/4 of the way through, all through. I'm done. It's like I edit it one way, you know, one pass of the editing, and it's like, what the hell do I do now? You know, I've got a book, which right there in itself is a huge accomplishment, but I want to get it published now. You know, so what do I do? And I said, well, I had moved back to Vermont at that point in time, and my uncle is a big reader. I said, look, my dad, again, not much of a reader, my mom, not much of a reader, but my uncle loved reading. I said, Jack, side story, my mom lost a bet to him, he got to name me, so I'm named after him. So there are two Jack Du Bruls in this world. I have the smaller nose, just. So I said, Jack, could you do me a favor and read the book and tell me what you think? You know, be honest. You know, I know we're family and all that, but if you knew him, he's a pretty gruff guy. He tells it exactly how it is. So he read it over the course of just a few days, and he said, Jack, it's actually pretty good. I liked it. And I said, really? And he says, I got a guy that, his name's Murphy. He said he runs a company that supplies books and magazines to convenience stores, grocery stores, things like that. That he might know somebody. But I don't want this to be like a whole big nepotism thing. So I'm going to take the cover page off. I'm going to say it's one of my customers that wrote this book. You know, that way it's, you know, and so he doesn't feel he's going to have to do you any special favors. So he gives the book to his friend Murphy, and Murphy reads it, and he really likes it too. He said, I happen to know a guy that was a publisher. He was actually Stephen King's publisher who bought the book Carrie for paperback that made him a millionaire overnight. I'm like, this guy's kind of big. Well, he's a literary agent now, just getting started. He might like it. I don't know. So, you want me to send the book? I'm like, what stupid question is that? Of course, send the damn book. So he sends his book to the agent named Bob DeForio. And week goes by, 2 weeks goes by, 3 weeks goes by, and I said, I called Murphy. I said, can you find out, what's going on? And Murph calls back a couple days later. He says, yeah, I talked to the agent Bob. I'm sorry, he didn't like it. There's nothing I can do. I said, I understand. That's okay. It wasn't okay. I wasn't okay. That was awful. It's the worst news I ever heard in my entire life. I was crushed. So I stewed for maybe another week or two. I finally called Murphy back. I said, could you do me a really big favor? I don't want to pester this agent, but I want to know what he didn't like about it. Just am I deluding myself completely like maybe I was before? Chances are yes, but just give me specifics. So Murph calls the agent Bob again, and I wasn't privy to this conversation, but I can imagine what's going on. And what didn't you like about the kid's book? I mean, he's devastated. What was wrong with it? And so Bob told Murph, well, I didn't really believe of the research he did about Shanghai in the 1930s. It just didn't ring true. A lot of anachronisms, a lot of problems with that. But essentially, I didn't like the characters, and I didn't like the whole love triangle. At which point Murph says, that's not the book I sent you. Remember, we took the cover page off. So he read a completely different book. So, of course, Bob gets tons of manuscripts all the time. So he digs through his decks, finds mine, calls me 3 days later, says, Jack, I love this. And we had the book sold about 2 weeks after that. That was Vulcan's Forge. So, of course, to this day, I still tease Bob. That was the manuscript that he lost after the fact. It was probably Dan Brown's first book, and you really screwed the pooch on that one. So that is how I got published. I mean, basically just fell ass into it. I know so many people out there that work so hard to find an agent, to find a publisher, and it just, blessed. I was just blessed beyond belief. But then I wanted to do another book. And so over the course of the next several years, I kept at it. People seemed to like the Mercer character. After the third book, I could actually quit my real job and write full time, which is dangerous because I was lazy and I enjoyed day drinking for a while. We'll get to that. But it became a dream come true for me. I was a published author. I was doing really what I loved. I got to travel. I got to meet a lot of fun people. It was incredible. And I really, I had to thank, Clive Cussler for that initial inspiration. And I was just amazed. So one day, I was having really bad week. My father's estate was going through the biggest audit his attorney, who happens to be right over there, had ever seen. It was awful. My mom had just recently passed away. Her cat that we took in had escaped. It was just like everything's going wrong. So come back from running some errands, and my answering machine, if you guys remember what those used to be, had just clicked off. So someone had called and left a message. So beep. Hey, Jack, it's Clive Cussler. Can you give me a call? I got something to talk to you about. I talked with Clive once before. I knew his sense of humor, so I called him right back. I actually had a beer and a cigarette to calm my nerves, and I called him right back. And I said, Clive, it's Jack Du Brul. I was screening my phone calls. You didn't get the cut. Not missing a beat. Clive goes, I get that all the time. So Clive, I chit-chat about some stuff, and he finally comes to the crux of it. He said that Craig Durgo, his friend who'd written the first two of the Organ Files books, didn't want to do a third book. Was I interested? And obviously, I screamed and yelled and shouted to the moon. Of course. I played it. I didn't play it cool at all. I was giddy like a little girl, to be honest with you. He said, what are you interested in? I said, well, I'd read the first one. The second one hadn't come out yet, but he's going to send me the advanced reader's copy so I could kind of get an idea of what this is all about. And I said, finally I said, yeah, absolutely. I can't not do this. You're Clive Cussler. You were like, my style is because of you. My career is because of you. I'll do anything to work with you. Absolutely. So he said, come up with a couple sample chapters, come up with an outline, and do like 3 sample chapters, and we'll talk about it. So, okay. So I came up with the idea of some sample chapters, sent it out to him in Phoenix. And he said, okay, I like what you're doing so far, but why don't you come out, we'll talk about it. So I'm getting to meet my hero. I'm going to be staying at Clive Cussler's house. He's going to pick me up at the airport. This is going to be awesome. So get all set to go, and leave on a Friday, come back, and leave on a Thursday, come back on Sunday. most important job interview of my life. So flight leaves at I think like 7:30. I woke up in the morning at 8. Completely missed my plane. Explained to Clive, what had happened, and he said, well, I didn't explain it. I overslept. I said the airport had some issues because it happened to be the band called Fish, which the local Vermont band had their biggest concert, like a 400,000 person concert in the state. So the airport was a zoo anyway. So I was like, I missed that out. So I finally get up to Phoenix. Clive picked me up at the airport, and I'm just so starstruck. But he's such a down to earth guy that within just a couple hours, I felt like I'd known him forever. It was just an amazing experience. Had anything never come of it from that point on, I still would have been just awesome. So we get into his office in his house. It's a little separate building that is just floor to ceiling Clive Cussler books in, I don't know, 100 languages. It's incredible. It really was. So he sits down behind his desk, and I'm sitting in front of him. He goes, Jack, I like what you've done so far, but the whole nuclear smuggling thing has been done to death. So what I want you to do is come up with something different. I'm going to go take a nap. I'll be back in an hour. I'm like, it's like my late wife used to always hand me birthday cards. Here, be funny, write it out. So actually, I changed it up a little bit. Came up with this idea for smuggling people for slave labor, and he thought that was pretty clever and original. So off we went. I was now writing the organ files. Again, honor of my life. The guy that inspired me to become an author, in the first place. That just means the world to me. I'm now working with. I call him on a regular basis. I still have him. He's been gone now a couple years. I still have his phone number and a couple of messages on my cell phone. Just because that was it. Disappointed fans. Mercer had to go on the wayside because I'm not dedicated like other authors that can do 2 series at one time. And I feel bad about it, but I told you I'm lazy. I admit it. So we did 6 of the organ files, or 7. And people ask me, how did that work? And Clive really explained it to me well at the very beginning of our partnership. He says, Jack, I'm making the money, you're doing the work. I'm like, fair enough. No, it's interesting because a lot of authors cannot be editors, and a lot of editors cannot be authors. There's 2 very different skill sets involved. Clive was actually a genius at both. So how our system worked, and you've heard Doug and Lincoln talking about how they do it. With how we worked it out is I would develop a plot, because Clive had already come up with all these characters. I would come up with a plot, run it by him. We'd talk about it, modify this, modify that. I would then write the first third of the book, present it to him. He would read it, give me notes back, right direction here, bad direction there, this character, whatever. We change it up, and then the next third, and then we had a finished book. And that he does that with all the other co-writers. It's been a great system. It's been, since his passing, his son has now taken over that mantle and has done actually an exceptional job as well. For someone, again, who's a trained accountant, to finally said when his dad retired, can I have a shot at it? And he's done a great job. Those are big shoes to fill, but Dirk is a big, tall guy himself, so he's got no problem with that. But after a few years, like the 7 or 8 books, I wanted to go back to doing Mercer. I really miss working in the character. I like having a little more freedom. No one could tell me no or yes. In publishing, once you finish the novel, you give it to an editor. Those are suggestions. You don't have to actually do them. You should, but you don't have to. So I kind of wanted that freedom back. So I told Clive that this was the last book. I'm sorry, he understood. It's been a long run, a lot of fun. So I went back to doing my Mercer novels. And again, I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. And then my wife fell ill. Her cancer returned, and I pretty much put my career on hold to take care of her. But about a year into it, I get a call from my agent, Bob, still there. This is I'm blanking the guy who was writing oh, come on, Jack, who was writing the Isaac Bell books. He said he was no longer going to be doing them. Would I be interested? And I said, no, I didn't really care for the character all that much, to be honest. And, I've got my wife, I've got my Mercer books, I don't have any interest. And Bob said, well, Jack, just think about it. You got time, take a couple of days, and to think about it. And so I'm like, okay. So I looked online, did some research about the Isaac Bell character. I thought all the books that, when Clive wrote it was 1906, because he wanted to take advantage of the San Francisco earthquake. But as I read about the character, it kind of jumped from late 1890s up through the 1920s. So I'm like, okay, so I got this kind of time period, which I thought was a fascinating time period. So I can kind of set anything in that frame. Like, well, what would be an interesting story? What can I write about that would be, something that I'd be fascinated with as a detective? And it just hit me like over the head, instant explosion. I said, Isaac Bell is going to help the characters from Raise the Titanic get to the Titanic in the original story, and everything came full circle, from being inspired by that book to working with the author of that book to now being able to write the prequel basically to that book. My life became full circle. It was an amazing thing. I told Clive the idea. He was really, really enraged that he hadn't thought of it himself. And I said, okay, I'm back in the working for Clive Custer. I will do the Isaac Bell book. But I said, Clive, chances are I'm going to do just this one book. It really isn't what I want to do. He said, we'll talk about it, see how you feel. To his credit, he was literally a human dam between myself and the publishers, because the publishers wanted me to work right away. And Clive had lost his wife to breast cancer. I was about to lose mine to breast cancer. He understood. And he said, Jack, take all the time you need. I said, Clive, I have to take care of her. He said, I understand that. And so for the next year and 5 months, he told the publishers, no, I'm not going to hire another author. I'm not going to do anything else. This is it. This is the guy I want, and it's going to take all the time it needs. And I think his instincts, I think paid off. It was one of the best-selling books he's had. And it was just, again, an honor to have this man, again, my hero, now my friend and my defender. It was just, life does not get much better than that. So I said that was it. The book came out, and I said, Clive, I really wasn't interested. And then one day I'm sitting there on back deck. It was a stormy, kind of rainy night, kind of nice. And I thought, what do I want to do next? I wasn't really sure. And it just hit me. Isaac Bell's never been in the jungle. Why would that thought? It just out of the blue. And so from that came Saboteurs, and then I came up with the idea, well, I think Isaac Bell should be on the Lusitania, and he should be the reason they sink it, and then boom. And so just recently, I was talking with Dirk, and he said, do you have any ideas? And I said, I got a title, The Heist. He goes, write that book now. So that was what I am working on now. So it has been a crazy journey. It has been an amazing experience. I have had so much fun with it. But there's been some sacrifices, and I was listening to Doug and Lincoln yesterday, and Doug was talking about his experience going to the jungles of Honduras, I believe it was. But the things I've done for research for my books, and especially the one story that comes to mind, was I had to go to Iceland for Pandora's Curse. I had to be comped a day at the Blue Lagoon Spa for my readers. I put it out there. I had gone by myself. I was actually engaged at this point in time, and spent about a week. Went to all around Iceland, and a couple of days in Greenland. Came back, and my wife was a trained accountant, and so she always did our taxes. So dutiful. All the receipts, kept everything, hotels, meals, you name it. I was like spot on with this. So getting around tax time. I don't know. I think I was upstairs doing something. She was in the kitchen table doing all the things. Jack, get down here right now. What? So downstairs. What's going on? Explain this to me. It's a receipt. Well, it's my dinner receipt. Look in the back. Flip it over in the back. Inga, call me, and a phone number. In the history of men begging their wives to calm down, it has never worked. It didn't work that day either. Finally, I said, look, I'm a smart guy. if I had seen that, do you think I would have thrown that away? Do you think I would give you a receipt to save $3 on taxes? Do you think I'm that stupid? No, you're not, but it's going to cost you jewelry. It did. So I sacrifice for the books. I go out there. She was a waitress at a restaurant. I remember she was kind of cute, but that was it. But again, like I said, it's been such a blessing because again, I mean, I just started out as a simple reader, just a guy that loves imaginative stories. Then whatever gift that is out there that I could come up with an idea of my own. And that's actually the cue I get asked more often than anything else is where do your inspiration comes from? Where do these ideas come from? And I heard a podcast, and I'll give him credit for wherever it is, but I don't know who the author was. And he gave the most amazing answer I'd ever heard. And they said, where do your inspiration come from? And he said, that is a question authors dread. They always dread it. And they always give you some flippant thing. Oh, I just plagiarized Clive Cussler. It's easy. Anyone can do it. But we're scared to answer that question because a lot of times we don't know where it comes from. And if we try to define it, if we try to say this is where it comes from, we're going to lose it. So we don't define it ever. We just accept it as the gift. But he said, you know what? He said, this author was asked, it was a little girl that asked him. He said, I couldn't give her a smart ass answer. I had to give her a real answer. And he said, convergence. And she looked at him like, what does that mean? He said, when two things come together. And she's explained that to me. And so he explains. He said, as an author, I mean, you're always thinking ideas, you're always thinking about stuff, but it doesn't really pan out or whatever. And he said, with him, he was writing a series with one character. And publishing houses like that because it gives continuity and continuous, so the fans know what's coming. There'll be another book in that series. It makes it easier for the author because you already have one character in mind and you can work with that character all the time rather than having to come up with someone new every time, at least for these kind of fiction. And he said, so you're always got that character in mind. And so boom, you got one train on the track. It's already going. And then you start thinking of that character in a different situation. And then this other idea from out of left field, like with Isaac Bell. Isaac Bell's never been in a jungle. That's another idea. Those things are now running together. And then slowly they converge. And so, okay, well, why is Isaac Bell in a jungle? What's jungly going on in 1912, 1914, like Panama Canal? Okay, now there's the idea. Out of this weird thought, always thinking about Isaac Bell, thinking what the character do, what could he do next? You have that, and then that eureka, weird, trying to find a circumstance or something else. And then, like I said, jungle. So, okay, well, what jungle? And then, like I said, when I came up with the Panama Canal, and it's that moment. And I remember J.K. Rowling talking about when she came up with Harry Potter. She's on a train, and he said that one eureka moment where the whole world opened up, and she had 7 books written inside of probably 3 seconds. She knew exactly what was going to happen. She knew the whole thing. So again, when I thought Isaac Bell in a jungle, and I said Panama Canal, boom! I had the whole story was right there, ready to go. Or Isaac Bell helping the miners that get on the Titanic in the original book. Boom, it was right there. I had the whole book written. It basically was just like dictating out of my brain. So I mean that I think the short answer were those questions or where the inspiration comes from. If that's not, I don't know, but it kind of works for me. So I think that's about it. So. Anybody have any questions? Are we going to do a microphone for them?
I'm not sure that there is one.
Oh, okay. Check. Here we go. Yes, I was an AV geek back in high school.
Is it on?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Who's?
I'm just curious. A lot of your books have what I'd call dangerous escape situations. How in the world do you figure that out? Do you get into it a little bit and then say, oh, now we're going to go left or go right, or do you know the entire path of all these convoluted, dangerous escapes?
Boy, I am stumped. I don't. I'll tell you. I'll give you one example. It was Mirage, the last book I did of the Oregon Files, and it had my villain on top of a high-rise building in Shanghai. He had the whole the top floor, the outdoor pool, and it was just a beautiful setting, unbelievable security. Plus the Chinese state security. There's no overflight of the city. He had goons on every floor of this building. He had bodyguards everywhere. There's no way to get into this building whatsoever. It's an impenetrable fortress. I'm like, crap. How do I get my team up there? I just wrote myself into a complete corner. I got to come up with something. And then late night one night, I was watching an old James Bond movie, and there's James Bond on a rocket or a jetpack. I'm like, jetpack up the building. Done. Easy. So sometimes you write yourself in a corner, but a lot of times, you do kind of plan out what you want to have happen. Okay, it's going to be a runaway train. Well, how are they going to stop it? Well, at the end of the train, it goes down to some docks, and all the cars are going to go in the water, so that stops it. But then you just throw in things in the middle that just seem interesting. Another fight scene here, another bad guy gets on the train, something like that to keep it going. But I try, and every author does, and every filmmaker the same way. Try to give readers something they've never seen before. It's difficult because there's been so many action scenes and this, that, and everything else. But you do the best you can. Use your imagination, and come up with something. Like again, I had my book River of Ruin. Again, I had Mercer, my character, and his friend Harry White, who used to be a sea captain. And so I just had this mental image pop in my head of Mercer and Harry on a freighter as the Panama Canal doors get blown open and they go down like a log flume. And Harry's just laughing his ass off. He's having a blast. I've never seen that, never imagined that in any film before. And if any producers out there, I'd love to see that on the big screen, just throwing it out there. But yeah, so that's that.
So I have maybe three.
Okay.
Typewriter or computer, and for every book you've written that was published, how many are still sitting in a drawer somewhere that you are not ready for?
Books that I've written that haven't been published? The first book that I wrote that never got published, I've actually cannibalized a lot of scenes from that. So that one is put away. I did co-write a book. It was kind of a internet thriller before the internet became a big thing. And tried to publish that, went to 16 or 17 different publishing houses and couldn't get it sold. And unfortunately, it is on the little small original floppy disks, and I have no way of, I could probably find someone who has a computer who can do that. But yeah, no, and again, everything, I can't type. I do 2 fingers and my thumb. So I'd never be a typewriter, but always be a computer.
Next. I'll get to the back.
You struck a chord. My family was friends with Johnny Mercer, arguably the greatest lyricist in the history of songwriting. And he said whenever an idea came to him, a lyric or something, he had to pull over if he was driving. If he was sitting at a restaurant, he gets out the napkins, and start scribbling it down. So I can go along with you on that. And you kind of answered this in your speech, but as far as getting permission maybe from the family to continue, just like the Ian Fleming thing, Jeffrey Deaver got permission to do a Bond novel. And Vince Flynn now has a writer and Tom Clancy, things like that. How does that? Is it in a conjunction with the family and your publisher, or how does it?
Yes. The Cussler estate controls the Cussler name. The fact that their son Dirk is a writer with the family makes it a whole lot easier. So no one will approach. They could approach. I want to write a Dirk Pitt novel. They probably would never say yes, but yeah, that's how it is controlled. Because at a point, and Clive was one of the first. Actually, Clancy was the first one to do it. It became a brand name, like Coca-Cola or Nike. There was a quality product. You knew you'd enjoy it every time. I mean, Patterson has taken it, way out. But especially when with Clive, and Clive read every book that came under his name. I know for a fact Clancy didn't. Clancy didn't care. He wanted the money. But Clive loved his readership more than anything else. He wanted to make sure that they had the best, 7, 8, 10 hours, however long it takes to read a book, that they had the best time of their lives. And that was so important to him. So.
That was pretty much my question, because I wasn't sure if Clive passed away in 2020, why his name is still on the book, and that's because of the
he created
branding.
the characters, and I didn't understand. When he was alive, it's Jack Du Brul, or Clive Cussler with Jack Du Brul. I don't know the publishing intricacies of why the book is now just by Jack Du Brul with Clive's name above it. Marketing. I mean, I don't know if they can, legally call him the author anymore. So I know, like with Clancy, it's Tom Clancy's Op Center by. So I think it's kind of the same thing. So, yes, sir.
When
Oh,
when you started doing the Clive Cussler books,
where are we?
right here,
Oh, okay. Thank you.
sorry, did you need to change your style of writing because the flow seems so seamless between yours and Clive's?
Because he was such a huge inspiration for me, I mean, I pretty much copied his style, so it was easier. Biggest difference is Clive didn't like a whole lot of introspection with his characters, which I heartily disagreed with. And his characters don't really suffer the way a real person does in some instances. That and no sex scenes and nixed profanity. Again, my first time back with writing Mercer, the first scene I wrote, which I never published, was just like a 20-page sex scene. I'm like, get this out of my system now. As of right now, yes. As of right now, I've got another idea for another one involving dreadnoughts. So we'll see. But you never know. You're always as good as your last book.
Where'd you pull out the Lusitania?
Again, just thinking about events of that time. So I go on the internet and say important events of such and such a date, and you just pop up this, that, and then some earthquake here, some fire there, like Lusitania torpedoed. Knowing again Clive's affinity for ships in all his books, it was like the perfect thing. And that's one thing, and I want to talk with Doug and Lincoln about this. Is researching the time, the period is so much fun, because I mean, especially where the time I'm in, it's the modern world, but just slow down a little bit. So they had, and again, it was fascinating. They had D-cell batteries like we have today. It's the same thing. I had no idea. So it's been a lot of fun. I'll share a neat little thing that sometimes it works out when you're doing your research. And I actually spoke with Dan Brown about it one time years ago when he did Da Vinci Code. All the research just came together perfect. So I got a scene in the new book, Heist, that Isaac Bell is trapped on a sinking ferry with a young kid. And it's because the kid's so small, it gets him out. So just generic kid. It's like, now, maybe find like a real kid that'd be kind of interesting. So I looked around, who was born, and so this is like 1914, the story takes place. So who was born like 1902? And I found Lou Gehrig. But Lou Gehrig was actually very, very poor, and this kid is a Boy Scout, and his family probably couldn't afford it. So I'm looking around, saying no one else is interesting, so I go 1 year earlier. Boom, Elliot Ness. So Isaac Bell is saved by Elliot Ness as a boy. It just worked out.
Okay. I have two things. One, I do notice in your books you have a tendency, or Clive has a tendency toward James Bond.
Yes.
Yes, I see that running as a theme. I go like, gosh, this sounds like a James Bond story. But also, my question is, why did Clive feel the need to bring somebody else in to write with him or write for him? Did he have a problem writing all of a sudden? Did he suddenly become an alcoholic or a drug addict or something? Or why? Because if he's writing all these books for years and years and years, Why all of a sudden are you here? Why are these other writers here? What happened?
When it came to the Numa Files, which is the first of the spin-off books, the publisher actually approached Clive and said, because Clancy had done it already, he said, Clive, would you be interested in doing a spin-off, of the book in this fictitious world, and the one that you created? And so, Clive thought about it. He had an author in mind. Unfortunately, it wasn't me. It really irked, but that's another story. And so that's how the Numa Files was born. And it was, a published success. And so they said, Clive, any other ideas? He said, well, I had this book, The Oregon, in one of my books. That crew might be an interesting story. So they went with Craig Durgo. Again, irked me, but that's just, so it was a way of expanding that world. I mean, it was a moneymaker for the publisher, a moneymaker for Clive. But as Clive got older, basically he wanted to retire. He said it's harder and harder to come up with plots. It is. I mean, people who are creative tend to be creative in their 30s and 40s. After that, it gets difficult. Clive, up through his 70s was still cranking out books. But he said, Jack, I'm just tired. I want to retire. He said, and I want to write a Western. That's the last thing I'm going to do. So he turned over Dirk Pitt to his son Dirk, and he wrote the book, the Isaac Bell book, The Chase, because he just liked Westerns. It's just one of his things he wanted to do. And then he spent a lot of time, the later years in life, just traveling, having a good time, but still, being an editor for the world he'd created. So I hope that answers your question. No, he will. So my interview with him, our last night, we'd had dinner, and we had a beer at dinner. He goes, Jack, you want a drink? I said, oh, sure, I'll have a drink with you. Yeah. So I knew he was a tequila drinker. I'm not much of a tequila drinker, but I can be okay. So we sat, a little table, 2 chairs, overlooking this pool, a little waterfall. It was beautiful. And we just start chatting, this, that, and everything, talking about Civil War, history, books. I mean, just interesting guy. Stories he's got, cockroach racing in bathtubs at seedy hotels, on book tours. I mean, you name it. He had great stories. Until we realized we've been out there about 2 hours, and there's only about that much tequila left. So he takes the cap off the bottle, and he goes, well, we're going to finish this one. So my job interview was getting drunk with my boss. Best interview ever. Yes?
So 2 quick questions. One, how did you actually meet him? He was your role model from a child.
Mm-hmm.
Normally, a normal person doesn't get to meet their role model or their hero.
Right.
And you said you met him, so how?
When my second book was still an advanced reader's copy, the publisher asked Clive to give it a jacket blurb, the little thing that on top, best book ever, blah, blah, blah. And Clive has been generous with new authors for his entire career. He won't give a second blurb to anybody, but if it's a new author in the adventure genre, he'll read the book and generally say something very, very kind, which he did for my book. So that's how I kind of gave him on his radar. And then it was his publisher for a time that I worked with on that internet book that never got published. And as a birthday gift to me, he had Clive call me. And, because they'd worked, so, again, and that was the phone I took right up, and so, I mean, stunned. So, Clive was aware of me. And he, after the fact, he told me he'd been kind of following my career. And it was nice to see another Du Brul book come out. And they got, started getting, hardcover deals. He was very proud of that because he knew he was part of my success. So when his friend Craig Durgo was no longer wanted to do the Oregon Files, he told the publisher, I want Du Brul. That's exactly who I want. So that's how it came to be. I felt like, some young actor having De Niro call him up and say, I want you in my movie. Yeah. It was just like, there was that feeling. It was great.
And then you said this is your first book festival?
Yes.
Why, after all these years, is this the first one?
I've never been invited to one. I grew up in Burlington, Vermont, which is a town of about 40,000 people. They had a book festival every year. I was never invited. So thank you. Sir. Guy sitting behind you, one of them, Jim Rollins. My favorite authors was Clive and the South African author who just recently passed, Wilbur Smith, who Clive and I have talked about is the best writer going. Because again, he paints word pictures that are masterpieces. That you can taste the sand and the grit and the smell of the sand and grass. You can feel the rhinoceros breathing down your neck. He was just an incredibly vivid, brilliant writer. Doug Preston, Lincoln Child. Basically any of the, I'm a thriller fan. I don't do a lot of mysteries. I do very little sci-fi. But so any new thrillers that come out, the guys have been around for a while. I mean, Vince Flynn, name any of them, and I'm right there with you guys. So when again I see a new Jim Rollins book, I gotta buy that right now, or Doug Preston. I mean, I'm just still a bibliophile.
Some of your books kind of touch on steampunk. Have you ever considered moving a little bit into that direction?
I hadn't really. I've read a few steampunk. I think it's a fascinating, interesting world, and it's visually beautiful. But I don't really have that kind of creativity. I don't think. I need to be grounded in worlds that I recognize. I don't think listening to some again fantasy writers last night talking about world building. It's daunting to me. That terrifies me. So I don't think I could do it. Yeah. Yes. So I don't know if you were aware of this, but Clive's hobby was looking for shipwrecks. I mean, rich people do rich people things, I guess. And again, his greatest discovery was the Confederate submarine Hunley in Charleston Harbor. He'd gone searching for it several times with a crew, a diver, and a side-scan sonar specialist, and finally found it way off where they didn't think it was going to be. They thought it was another piece of pipe, and sure enough, it was. What's interesting with Clive, though, he didn't have much to do with raising it. Once he found it, he defended it from the U.S. government wanted to get involved. The Navy wanted it because it said, well, it was a Navy ship, which it wasn't. It was never part of the Confederate Navy. It was actually a privateer under letters of marque to be a raider. So he was instrumental in getting it to switch over to the South Carolina Historical Society. But after that, he got out of it because then they get a lot of politics. With anything with money involved, it just egos get involved, and Clive's like, what, I want to go find the Bonhomme Richard, which was John Paul Jones' ship off the coast of England. So that he went off to look for something else. Once he found a ship, they had no more interest in it.
Okay, great last question. Thank you very much.
And my favorite question came on from over here.